Hello everyone and welcome to another Fusion 360 Tech Tuesday. My name is Brad Tallis from Autodesk and today's topic is what we've learned from you guys. I've had such a pleasure doing these live streams for you all, and believe it or not, I've actually learned a couple things that I didn't even know was possible in Fusion, and you've shared those with us. And so I want to return the favor and share them with everybody else because I think some of them are really, really cool. Like I mentioned before, I love seeing what you guys and gals are doing with Fusion 360, and that's why we do these live streams for you. We want you to be able to design those parts that you've always wanted to design, to 3D print, to create with manufacturing like CAM, for example. So today I'm going to go through a couple of these tips and tricks that I've learned from you. And like I mentioned before, let me share this with you actually. I'm getting images from people. Let me make sure this is sharing okay. Yep, it's not going to share, of course. Go figure. I'll just hover over this. I'm getting images from all of you on how to, you're creating these parts either on Facebook or you're sending them in emails, etc. I apologize, I can't share all of these for whatever reason. They're not sharing. But for example, I've gotten some emails from Ekram, and I apologize if I mess up your names. Carl Baker sent me some stuff. Andrew Solby sent me one of those flagpole holders, and seeing what you guys are doing, it just makes me happy that you're able to follow along on these live streams and learn from us and take those skills and do your own thing with them. So let's dive right in. This is the funniest one. I didn't know you could do this. I did a live stream earlier where I created some text, and then I showed that you actually had to explode the text before you could extrude it. And I had a couple people mention that you don't have to explode the text. So for example, I'm going to go ahead and just click on this text and say press pull. And when I do that, it actually extrudes the text. And I'm laughing because for the longest time, I thought you actually had to explode it into a profile, which was extra steps. But here you can see you can just press or pull on the text to get the result that you want. So that is my first tip. And that was actually from Mihai Stanimir. And again, I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. From my 3D printing tips and tricks live stream. So thank you, Mihai, for that tip. So let me go ahead and continue on here. The next one was actually from this live stream we did with the flagpole mount. And this came from Daniel Lucente, and again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. When I was doing the text on this curved surface, I showed how you could offset this surface using the patch commands, and then we use that to basically replace the face of our extruded text. And Daniel said, well, there's a cool tip that I'm going to show you guys right now. In fact, you'll notice I'm over-exaggerating. I put the text way far away from the curved surface just to show how this is going to work. Again, I don't need to explode the text, but all I have to do is say press pull, and then I'm going to start to extrude this text. And we can see that it's actually floating way out here in space. But here's the trick, which I think is so cool. I didn't even think about this. In this start option right here, it says start from the profile plane. So it's starting from our sketch that's way out here. But instead, we're going to say start from an object. Then I can select the object, and you'll see that it actually extrudes from that object. And notice the text is curved. In fact, I have a very large distance. Let's just make this 1. And you'll see that sure enough, the text follows the shape of that surface. And we didn't have to create an extra patch. We didn't have to use replace face or anything like that. So Daniel, I'm going to give you a virtual thumbs up. Thank you so much for that one. I think that's really cool. Saves a lot of steps. So let me review that one more time because I think it's that important. So you put your text on a plane, right mouse click and say press pull. And then the option here is the start. So we want to start from an object. Then it's going to ask you what the object is. And then we just have to tell it how far do we want to extrude. In this case, 1 millimeter, or I could say 0.5 millimeters. And you can see how we can change that, and it's automatically curved. Really slick, I think. Okay, also you'll notice on the screen we're trying something new. You'll notice down here in the lower left corner we've got a keyboard and a mouse icon. And this was actually sent to us from Jan Detlefsen or Ian. It depends on where you're from. I know it can be pronounced 2 different ways. However, we want to thank you for this, and we'd like to get all of your feedback. What this allows us to do is, we've seen comments where like, well, what keys is he holding down when he's selecting multiple edges? So you can kind of see I'm holding down my control key. So you can kind of see how the control key is selected. And so when I'm grabbing other edges or faces, we can now see on the screen which mouse icon and which keys are being held down. So again, Jan or Ian, I apologize if I'm messing that up. Thank you for that. And everybody on the live stream right now, let us know what you think. Do you want to see that on the screen? Do you not? Does it help you as you're going through these live streams to see which keys we're pressing? Because we try and say, okay, hold down the shift key or the control key, but we don't do it all the time. So hopefully this will help you when you're reviewing those live streams. Okay, here's another one I find funny that I didn't know. This was back in the when I was showing how to create the flight test foam model. I was showing how to do fillets in 2D. So I was creating, I had a shape, and I'll kind of just recreate it really quick. I had a shape that looked something like this, and oops, I should have had it pre-made already. But I was basically tracing over an image that kind of showed a window or whatever. And so I ended up with a shape that looked like this, and I said, I want to fillet these corners. And so I showed how you could come in here under Modify and say Extend. And it's a cool command. You can kind of see, you just hover over that line there, and you hover over that line there, and it extends and creates that corner for you. And then I went in and said, okay, now we can do a fillet. Now that I have this intersection, I can just click on this intersection, and that's going to allow me to do a fillet. Well, Trevor Foster said, hey, you don't even have to extend those lines. You can actually do the fillet command without a corner. And I was like, no, you can't. And sure enough, I tried it, and check this out. I come in here and you basically click that line there. You click that line there, and it extends it for you. So again, a huge time saver where all I have to do is just click on these lines to get my fillet, and I didn't have to extend. So Trevor, virtual high five. Thank you very much. I'm going to use that pretty much every day now. So again, thank you for sharing that tip with everybody. So this one's actually kind of interesting. On the live stream I did where we did the lofting, you'll notice my timeline is actually fairly simple for a shape like this. And when I went and created this slot, I also created this removable area right here. So, a bolt or whatever can come down. And I'm going to actually step back in time. So let's go ahead and see. So this is where I created that extrude. And here's where I created the larger extrude. So you can actually see there's my sketch or my profile. Okay. Then I extruded the small slot, and then I extruded the large slot. And Ade Sami, again, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said, well, couldn't you have done it in a different order and it would have made it easier? And sure enough, that makes sense. So let me show you what we mean by this. So I'm going to drag my timeline all the way back to the sketch. So we look like this. I'll go ahead and turn on my sketch. And what I did is I had clicked on this profile here and said extrude. And I said, go symmetrically through all, okay? And then I came in and said, okay, now let's do this larger one. Okay, I'll go ahead and click on that profile. Like so. And then I extruded that up. Like that, okay? So what Adea was saying is maybe we do the big slot first and then do the smaller slot second. So let's go ahead and see what's the difference. So I'm gonna step back. And what he's saying is, instead of having to do the small one first and then kind of come back over it, we're just going to go ahead and click on both of these profiles, like so, and extrude. And all I have to do is drag just a little bit up, and I can say all. And you'll see that it's going to remove a large majority of that area for me. And it doesn't go in both directions because I just dragged straight up. And I said, cut through all of it. So I don't really care about what the height is. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. We'll turn our sketch back on. And now I can just come in and say, extrude just the slot. And I'll say down all. And you can see that it's only going to have to cut through this little area. I'll say, okay. And you see we get the exact same result, but I think in a cleaner method. So Ade, I agree with you, and I really appreciate the feedback because, does it matter which order? Not really, but does it make more sense to do it a certain way versus the other? Absolutely, and I think your method simplified things. It was more like how you would physically machine the part in real life, if you were to, use the CAM module, for example. 3D printing, it doesn't matter per se, but I kind of like to design how it's going to be manufactured. So great job, 2 thumbs up on that one. Okay, now this next one is huge, and I apologize because I could not find who mentioned this, and I think this is probably one of the biggest tips of this live stream. When I was creating this cutting board, I showed how you can use the copy and paste new command to basically create multiple copies of this. And people were asking, well, why couldn't you pattern it? And I said, well, you can't pattern because if you do, it basically creates a copy of it, and if you modify one, it messes up the other ones. And so somebody, and again, I apologize, I wish I knew who it was. So if it's you, please mention it in the chat or the messages, and I will give you credit for this. Showed that you could copy the bodies instead of the components. So let me show you what we mean by this. So here you can see I've got 4 separate bodies right now. Okay, and I'm going to create a component. So new component, let's just call this wood block assembly or something like that. And I'm going to drag these 4 bodies into that component. If we expand this open, we can now see that we have these 4 bodies in here. Now I want to pattern these. So I'm going to come in here and say rectangular pattern. Now if I said components, so check this out, I'm going to change that to components, and I'll grab this guy here. And what's the direction? I'll just go in this direction for now. Okay. And I say okay. We'll see that we now have, basically 3 copies of this. But if I were to modify, for example, if I were to fillet this edge, you'll see how it fillets all of these edges. And in the example I was showing, I didn't want that to happen. Now I was actually, in fact, I should probably do it the right way. I was splitting the body. So I came in here and said, for example, let's just throw a line across this block. And if I said split body, I'm only clicking this one little cube right here. And I want to split it using that line. You'll see then it went all the way across. And this is what I was trying to explain in that live stream with that cutting board, is we had to do a lot of copying and paste new, which is basically, copying it, but it doesn't revert back, or it doesn't link back to the original, but it was a lot of manual work. So in this one here, this person said, well, instead of copying the component, copy the bodies instead. And so I tried it out, and sure enough, it works. So check this out. I'm going to undo all the way back. Let me just go back to here. Here's my bodies. And again, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to say new component. We'll call it wood block assembly. And I'll put these 4 bodies into that assembly. Into that component, I should say. Okay, so earlier I was showing how we can pattern the component, but this time I'm going to come in and say, let's pattern the bodies. So I'm going to select these 4 bodies, tell it the direction. So I'll go ahead and just click like so. Drag across. I'm not worrying about dimensions or anything like that right now. And if I were to come in here and say fillet this edge, you'll notice that it does not affect the other ones. So instead of having to do copy and paste multiple times, I'm actually able to use the pattern now. And again, if I were to split that face, let's go ahead and sketch a line on there real quick. Do the modify split body. What's my splitting tool? I'll go ahead and click on that line there, say OK, and we can see that it actually split this body, but it did not affect the other ones. So unnamed person out there, thank you so much. I did not know that, and I shared this with some of my coworkers, and they're like, what? I didn't know that either. So great job. I love the fact that, I like teaching Fusion, but I also like learning Fusion 360 also. So please, if you're watching any of my future live streams and you see anything, a better way of doing it, please throw it out into the comments, because there's always a better way, a different way, a faster way than what we might be showing you. So great job. Okay. This next one didn't really come from a live stream or whatever, but I've seen comments about it, and I wanted to highlight this again. I personally don't use it enough, and I should, and that is the S key. So if I press the S key on my keyboard, you'll notice that I get this design shortcuts window that pops up. And that shows up wherever your mouse is. So I'm over here on the left, I hit my S key, and you'll see that that shows up over here on the left. Okay? Now what's neat about this is you can actually add or customize your own tools into this shortcut. So for example, let's say I use let's split body command, right? Since I just did that. I'm going to hit the S key, and I can do a search for split. So I start typing in SP, and you can see all of the commands that have SP in there, including split body, split face. In fact, if I kept typing split, you'll see that, it only shows up the commands that have split in it. So let's say I use split body quite a bit. Well, you can see I can hit this little up arrow, and it's going to add that command into my shortcut. Okay? And it's going to remember this from now on. Even if I exit out of Fusion and come back in or whatever, next time I hit my S key, there's the split body command. And I don't have to remember, is it a modify command, is it a create command, or whatever. Okay? So you just hit the S key, and that shows up. Now, if you want to get rid of them, all you have to do is just drag them off of the shortcut dialog box. So I'm just dragging it out there. So here's the whole command. I'm just going to drag and drop it, and you'll see that that went away. Okay. The other thing I really like about this, especially if you're coming from other CAD systems, is sometimes you might not know what the command is. So for example, I want to reflect something. So I'm going to start typing in reflect. And you'll notice that nothing shows up. So I know that Fusion does not have a reflect command. Okay, so maybe it's mirror. So I'm going to start typing in mirror, and sure enough, there we can see we've got mirror commands. So if you can't remember the name of something, you can almost just start typing it in. Is it trim? Yep, it's trim. That's the command, right? So instead of having to hunt for it in a menu, you can actually type it right into this little search window. The other thing I like about the S key is it changes depending on where you're at. So for example, right now, I'm in my design workspace, so we see design shortcuts. If I were to switch into, for example, let's just say the manufacturer workspace, okay, and I hit my S key, you'll notice I have my manufacturer shortcuts, such as facing, adaptive clearing, and 2D contour. And again, I can put whatever command in here that I want. So for example, I type in SW, and I can see that it's going to show me the swarf command. And I can add that to my shortcuts. If I were in drawings, I could have drawing shortcuts. If I'm in my render, I could have render shortcuts. So you can pretty much customize this any way you want. And that's one of the cool things with this. So you'll notice now I'm in render, and there's my render shortcuts. So, okay. Neat little trick there. And the next thing I want to show, sort of related to that, is custom keyboard shortcuts. We added this a little while back, but for example, you'll notice some of the commands such as extrude, E for extrude, H for hole, when F for fillet, M for move. But then you'll notice Revolve says Control-Shift-R, and yours probably doesn't say that because this is actually a custom keyboard shortcut that I created. So to create your own custom keyboard shortcut. So for example, let's do the web command. I'm going to go ahead and just click these three little dots. And you'll see we have a couple options. Pin to toolbar, which will pin it up here. So for example, I've put the sphere command and my plane along a path command. I've pinned those to my toolbar. Then you also have pin to shortcuts, and that's a quick way to put it into that little S key that I just showed you. So if I came in here and said pin to shortcuts, now when I hit my S key, you'll see there's the web command. So that's another way to do it. And then finally, we have the change keyboard shortcut. Okay? And what this allows you to do is to assign a new shortcut key for web. And then you can see you can combine modifiers like Shift or Control, Alt, etc. So I'm going to type in W, and that one works. So you can kind of see it would let us do that. But if I typed in like T for, T, it says, hey, that conflicts with trim. Or if I did M, it's going to say that conflicts with move copy, right? So I could say, for example, Shift M, and that would work because I've added that modifier, such as the Shift key. But in this case, I'm going to just use the W key because W for web. I'll say OK. And now when I come over here, we can see that I've added a keyboard shortcut of W. So as you get better with the product, you can create your own custom S key shortcuts, which a lot of people use, or you could do keyboard shortcuts, which I use quite a bit. Okay, and then lastly, and I know I've mentioned this in a previous live stream, but I do get a lot of comments about how is he orbiting the screen so nice and smooth, and I always have a hard time orbiting, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm using one of these 3D connection devices, and it looks like a little hockey puck, but it allows you to pan and zoom and rotate and all that kind of stuff with this device. Now I'm going to switch back to my screen so you can kind of see. I'm not going to move my mouse. You can see my mouse kind of hovering up here in the middle of the screen. I'm using my 3D connection right now to zoom and pan and orbit. And if you're doing any amount of CAD work, I think it's definitely worth, they're around $100, but I definitely think it's worth it. I also know that 3D Connection has come out with a 3D mouse. I personally haven't tried it yet, so I can't give any feedback on that. Now, if you aren't using either of those, there's a couple ways you can rotate and pan and zoom. And the key thing is just to use your mouse, okay? And we actually give you a bunch of different ways to do this. So the very first one is to just use your middle mouse button. And again, hopefully you can kind of see on the little image on the screen, I'm pushing or scrolling my middle mouse button away from me, so it's zooming away from me. I'm scrolling the wheel toward me, so it zooms toward me. Okay, that's the middle mouse button wheel. If I hold down my middle mouse button, so I'm constantly holding down my middle mouse button, you can see I can pan. Okay, and then the last thing is for rotate, is to hold down your shift middle mouse button. So again, you can see on the screen down here, I'm holding down my shift key, and I'm going to hold down my middle mouse button, and that allows me to orbit around. So if you don't have a 3D mouse or a 3D connection, this is what I would recommend getting used to. Now there's a couple other ways you can do it. You can actually use this cube up here. A lot of people think, oh, I just click on top and it goes to top, or if I click on the side, it goes to side. But you can actually just grab onto the cube itself with your left mouse button and drag it around. And you can look at pretty much any direction. So I'm still holding down my left mouse button while I'm clicking on that cube, and I'm able to orbit around. I can also do some really cool things, such as clicking on like this corner right here gives me an isometric view in all three directions. So we're looking straight at that corner. Or I could click on, for example, that right there, and we're looking at it isometrically in this direction. So kind of a cool method there is just using the cube. And then the last method, which I saved for last because I like it the least, I personally don't recommend doing this. However, you absolutely can. You can use these few icons down here. Now, here's why I personally don't like using it. It's a toggle. So if I click on orbit, you can see I get this image that shows up. Okay. And as I drag around, we can kind of see how it allows me to drag around. But as soon as I let go, I'm still in this orbit command. Now, if let's say I wanted to fillet this edge over here, maybe pick this edge, you'll notice I'm not in my select window. So if I try and click on that edge to select it, it's not letting me. In fact, it kind of zoomed to it, right? But it's not letting me select that edge. So I actually have to escape out. I have to hit the escape key, and now I'm able to select that edge. So you just kind of have to remember, same thing with pan, it's kind of a constant toggle. So even though I'm not holding down my mouse anymore, I'm still in the pan command. And even if I come down here to click on it to toggle it off, it doesn't. So you just have to remember to hit the escape key. I'll hold down that longer so you can kind of see that on the screen. You just have to escape out of there. And then same thing with zoom. I can zoom in and out, but I have to escape out of there. So I personally don't like using these, but that's up to you. Okay, with that, I'm keeping this one short. This one's about half an hour long. Again, I want to thank all of you for your positive comments, seeing what you guys are making, and gals, I should say. What you're making, you're sharing them on Facebook, and if you haven't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the Fusion 360 Facebook group. There's a lot of really cool threads going on in there, people asking questions, and you can kind of see how people answer those. So if you haven't, I recommend signing up for that. Definitely make sure you've subscribed to the Fusion 360 live streams that we're doing. Give us a thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever. If you have any topics you want to see on upcoming live streams, definitely share those in the comments. I want to give a shout out to my buddy Aaron for answering the questions on these live streams. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.